Hi everyone, it's Alex Wilson here, accredited mental health social worker and owner of Mindful Recovery Services in Avoca Beach, New South Wales. So today on this vlog, I'm going to be talking about first sessions. Okay, so I know that for a lot of people, going to see a therapist for the first time is a very nerve-wracking experience. Maybe it's your first time ever going to see a therapist, or maybe you've seen people before, but you're new to this person. And it's really normal to feel quite nervous and anxious about that. And so I just wanted to kind of give some general information about what you could expect in a first session, how I like to do things. Of course, everybody varies a little bit, but there are some common features. And I guess, some of the important things to know going into your first session. Okay, so when you call up to make an appointment for your first session, or you might send an email and somebody calls you back, generally at that time, you will give a bunch of information to the admin person or the secretary about whether you've got a referral and how you heard about this therapist and when you'd like to come in and when you're available. And in return, the admin person should run you through all of the nitty-gritty practicalities, okay? So they'll be able to tell you about rebates and session fees. So they will tell you how much the sessions cost and how much you could expect to be rebated if you have a Medicare GP referral, for example, or other type of referral. There might also be differences in fees. So for some clinicians like myself, we charge more for evenings and weekend appointments, and business hour appointments are a little bit cheaper. So depending on your availability, you can decide what you want to do there. And then they'll generally give you an idea of how long till the next possible appointment. There's often an option to go on a cancellations list if you would like to be notified if an appointment comes up sooner than your booked appointment. Typically in this conversation as well, the admin person will gather from you some details to allow billing to happen really easily after your first session and for ongoing sessions. So my team, for example, will get Medicare card details, they'll get credit card details on file and then put them into our encrypted program, so they're very secure. Phone numbers, addresses, referral documents, if that's relevant. Our team will often help people, chase up referral documents if they're needed. So we try and get everything in place before that first session, because there's nothing worse than spending half your first session figuring out paperwork and payments, right? That's not how you want to spend your time. You want your time with your therapist to be really focused on helping you with some of that emotional stuff and with what's going on. So at my practice, generally, we try and get all of that stuff sorted out before you even come in. The other thing that we do, and I know a lot of practices do this, is that we'll then send we'll send a welcome email to every new client. And in that email, we'll provide all the information about our cancellation policies, about privacy, about the location, and little tips and tricks when going to the office. So it might be, where the waiting area is. For my Avoca office, for example, we'll often tell people, if the sign says in session, just wait in the waiting area and we'll come and get you when we're ready. Things like that. It'll also talk about session times. So, most of us run a session that goes 50 minutes. And what that does is it allows us 10 minutes at the end so that we can do whatever clinical notes we need before we have the next client booked in. And also sometimes there's reports or phone calls or different things we need to do. So we take that 10-minute block to, do that stuff. So it's important going into your first session that you know how long is the session going to take. Now, my initial sessions with people, I always book longer than 50 minutes because there's more that needs to be done. But, it's important to know how long is a standard session. Sometimes I know people come in and they think the session is 60 minutes. And so when I start wrapping things up at the 45-minute mark, they're sometimes a little bit concerned or surprised, but all that information is in that welcome email. So it's really important to read through it so that you know what to expect. Also, if you know you've got 50 minutes and it's really 45 minutes of talking and then 5 minutes of booking the next appointment and figuring out other things that might need to be done, you can plan what you want to talk about, so that you don't leave the important stuff, to 40 minutes in. So that's the first tip. Make sure that you get all the information you need going into your session to know what to expect. And if you have any questions, ask the admin team. Send an email or ask them on the phone or make a phone call, just so that you feel reassured. And I think that if you know what to expect, it's a little less nerve-wracking. So once you get into your session, what should you expect? Now, of course, all us clinicians run our initial sessions a little bit differently. I have my own template that I've been using for years that I continue to use. But I think most clinicians would, follow a similar process of doing an initial assessment. Now, the referral documents that we might get from your GP or from other professionals sometimes are very brief. So sometimes I'll get a GP referral and it's really only a couple of lines about the patient, which is fine. So then I need to figure out a little bit more like what's really happening for this person. So I will ask about things like, who are you living with? What are your social supports? What previous mental health treatment have you had, if any? And how did it go? Was it helpful? Was it not helpful? I'll ask about psychiatric medications, just so I'm aware of that stuff. I'll ask about, intimate relationships, social isolation, see if any of that is going on. I'll ask about work, study, drug and alcohol history, legal issues, and then I'll go into more sort of the mental health examination stuff. So I'll ask people about their mood lately and anxiety. I'll ask them about, if they have been worrying about certain things and what they worry about. I'll ask them if they've had any funny experiences like hearing voices or things like that that are important for me to know. I'll ask about self-harm, suicide. That's part of our risk assessment that we always do. Any child protection concerns, risk of harm to others. I'll ask about trauma history. I'll ask about sleep and appetite and concentration and memory, and I'll ask what they do for fun, to get a sense of, what is their life really like. And then I'll generally talk about, what is the client's goals? What are they hoping to achieve through therapy? And sometimes some people are really clear on that and sometimes they're not, and that's fine either way. And then I'll generally talk a little bit about what kind of therapy might be most helpful for them. And I'll also want to introduce in the first session just some concepts and ideas to get them start thinking about ways they might approach things a little bit differently. So I'll often teach people in the initial session maybe about physical skills to help them get through times of distress, and then I'll give them some information to take away and start to practice that if that's relevant for them, or other things that I might introduce at that time. And then of course we make a plan for when we're going to catch up. Now I like to, when clients book in with me, I like to have at least 3 further sessions already booked, but ideally 6, so that we know we're going to have a regular catch-up time, whether that be weekly or fortnightly to start with, and then obviously we spread it out when people are more on sort of a maintenance schedule. So, we just confirm, okay, so you're booked in again and, next week, and let's work on this stuff. And then, send them away with something to try and knowing when they're going to come back in again. And hopefully in that first session, we've started to build a bit of a relationship. I always say that if you don't feel comfortable with your therapist by about the 3rd session, you should probably shop around. That relationship and that click is really important. And sometimes it's just personality, that you click with some people better than others. It's not personal. We don't take it personally. So, if the click's not there, shop around, try somebody else. But if it is, great, then you've got your plan happening. So those are my initial ideas about what to expect in a first session. Yes, you'll have to answer a bunch of questions. If that makes you nervous or anxious, maybe pre-prepare, bring something in. So you might want to write down a little bit about your history, particularly if you're nervous talking about it, and show that to your therapist, right? So that they can get a good sense of the history and the background, because the more information we have about you and your history and what's been going on, the more accurate we're going to be in figuring out what's going to help, right? So, write it down and bring it in if you're not comfortable talking. If you want to bring someone in with you, that's totally fine too. I leave that up to the client. With some of my younger clients, sometimes they'll want mum and dad in there in the first session, and then we'll do sessions just the two of us. Some young people don't want mum or dad there at all, and that's totally fine too. So I generally don't like to have mum and dads in every session because I find that it sort of changes the dynamic. But certainly in the first session, if you want to bring somebody in, you can. So any questions about this, or if you're anxious about attending a session and you're not sure what to expect, or there's other things you want to ask, drop me a line. All right, hope you're having a great day. Bye.